The sky cracked open like a wound, a massive silver ship eclipsing the sun as it hovered silently above the city. The invaders called themselves the Vorex, an alien race whose technology made them gods in the eyes of many. Their arrival had been swift, brutal, and precise. Military forces fell in hours, cities were flattened with clinical efficiency, and resistance seemed almost laughable. Nathan Gray watched it all from the cracked window of what used to be his apartment. He was a soldier once, but now he was just a survivor, a shadow slipping through the ruins of a world that had lost its power overnight. The Vorex didn't just crush buildings, they crushed hope. They believed Earth was weak, chaotic, and ripe for the taking. On the comm feed, generals talked about surrender. Scientists whispered about evacuation. But Nathan felt something else, something darker rising inside him. Fear had turned to anger, and anger was a fire that wouldn't be put out by treaties or prayers. The invasion was going smooth. Too smooth. That was the problem, because when things seemed their darkest, Earth's true response was about to begin, and it wouldn't be pretty. Nathan had never believed in heroes, not since the world had shown him its worst. But now, standing amidst the smoking ruins of his neighborhood, he felt the first stirrings of something he couldn't name. A hunger. Not for survival alone, but for retribution. The Vorex had come with their overwhelming weapons, their alien machines, and their cruel contempt. They'd treated Earth like a toy to be broken, a planet to be harvested and discarded. But Nathan knew something they didn't. Humans were not so easily broken. The air still smelled of burnt metal and scorched earth. Around him, the city was a graveyard of concrete skeletons, shattered glass, and lifeless bodies. The streets, once full of laughter and life, were now eerily silent except for the occasional distant rumble of Vorex patrols. Nathan moved carefully, avoiding patrol scanners and the hulking war machines that trampled everything in their path. He wasn't just running from death anymore, he was hunting it. He wasn't alone. Scattered groups of survivors had begun to band together, those who refused to bow or flee. Among them were soldiers, engineers, hackers, people who understood that the only way to survive was to fight back. But Nathan's group was different. They were the ones who had lost everything. Their families, their homes, their futures. There was no hope left for them except in vengeance. "Gray," a voice hissed from the shadows. It was Marla, a former intelligence officer who had turned rogue after the invasion began. Her face was streaked with dirt, her eyes sharp and cold. "We're moving tonight," she said. "We hit the supply depot outside the city. If we take it, we cripple their logistics for weeks." Nathan nodded. "They'll expect an attack eventually, but not from ghosts like us." They gathered in the basement of an abandoned warehouse, the walls covered in hastily drawn maps and tactical notes. The glow of a few flickering lanterns cast long shadows, making the room feel smaller, tighter, like a cage. But this was their cage, their war room. The Vorex had technology that seemed invincible: force fields, plasma rifles, drones that moved faster than the eye could see. Their soldiers were trained killers, biologically enhanced for combat. Yet Nathan believed there was one thing no machine could replicate: the ferocity born from desperation, the cold calculation of a man who had nothing left to lose. That night, as darkness swallowed the city, Nathan and his team slipped through the ruins. The streets were a maze of debris and danger. Every step was a gamble. Drones buzzed overhead, searching for signs of resistance. The heavy footfalls of alien patrols echoed like thunder. When they reached the depot, the Vorex guards were alert but complacent. They hadn't seen this kind of attack coming, an attack fueled by raw human hatred rather than strategic genius. Nathan's team moved like shadows, striking quickly and silently. Explosions shattered the stillness as they planted charges on fuel tanks and ammunition crates. But the victory was short-lived. Alarms screamed through the compound, red lights pulsing violently. The Vorex soldiers swarmed with terrifying speed, their plasma weapons blazing. Nathan's team fought fiercely, but they were outgunned and outnumbered. One by one, they fell, dragged into the fire and smoke. Nathan barely escaped, a deep burn across his arm and a sharp pain in his side. As he stumbled into the darkness, he realized something terrifying. The invasion wasn't going as smoothly for the Vorex anymore. Earth was fighting back, and it was fighting dirty. The world had changed. The Vorex had expected submission. They had underestimated the primal force that drove humanity, the will to survive, the refusal to be enslaved. And now that will had unleashed something brutal and unrelenting. Nathan's mind raced with dark possibilities. What if this was only the beginning? What if Earth's response was something the universe hadn't seen before, something savage and merciless? The Vorex might have had the tech, the power, but humans had something far worse: the capacity to descend into darkness and come back fighting. As the first flames from the depot's destruction painted the night sky, Nathan made a silent vow. He would become the storm the Vorex never expected. Not a soldier, not a hero, but a force of nature bent on reclaiming a world stolen from its rightful owners. The invasion was going smooth, right up until Earth responded. And when Earth responded, the universe would remember why humanity was not to be taken lightly. The next days blurred into a relentless haze of scavenging, planning, and brutal skirmishes. Nathan's burn was raw and aching, a constant reminder of how close he'd come to death. But pain was a small price to pay for purpose. Around him, the remnants of humanity began to awaken from their shock and despair, rising like a dark tide ready to drown the invaders. Nathan had never been a leader, but circumstances pushed him into that role. The survivors looked to him not because he was the strongest or the smartest, but because he refused to break. In a world stripped of mercy, stubbornness became a weapon. Every decision he made was a gamble. Every plan a knife-edge balance between survival and annihilation. The Vorex tightened their grip on Earth with brutal efficiency. They established fortified bases in every major city, cutting off communication and controlling resources. But their arrogance was their weakness. They treated humans like insects, expecting compliance or easy extermination. Instead, they ignited a resistance no one had anticipated. Nathan's group operated in the shadows, striking at weak points, sabotaging supply lines, and disappearing before the Vorex could respond. The alien patrols grew more cautious, their technology strained by an enemy who refused to play by their rules. One evening, Nathan sat around a fire with Marla and two others, a mechanic named Jax and a medic called Lena. The flickering flames cast harsh shadows across their faces, revealing exhaustion and determination in equal measure. "We need more than hit and run," Lena said quietly, her voice rough from too many sleepless nights. "We have to hit their command center, take out their control hub. If we can do that, maybe we can blind them for good." Nathan nodded, the idea settling like a stone in his gut. The Vorex command center was a fortress buried beneath the ruins of what used to be the capital city. It was heavily guarded, shielded by technology that no human weapon could breach. But Nathan knew there were cracks, flaws in every system, no matter how advanced. "Getting in won't be easy," Jax said, his hands stained with grease from fixing a battered comm device. "But I've been working on something, a way to hack their security protocols. It's risky, but it might just work." Marla leaned forward, eyes sharp despite the fatigue. "We don't have a choice. If we don't strike now, The Vorex will crush every last pocket of resistance. Nathan clenched his jaw. The weight of command pressed down on him like a crushing force. He thought of the people who had died. Friends, strangers, children lost to the invasion. Their faces haunted him, fueling a cold fire that burned away any doubt. "We plan carefully," he said. "We gather what we need, and then we hit them where it hurts. Hard and fast." The next days were a frenzy of preparation. Nathan's group moved through the ruins, recruiting others willing to fight. They gathered weapons, scavenged rifles, homemade explosives, anything that could pierce alien armor. Jax worked tirelessly on his hacking device, a crude but potentially devastating tool that could slip past Vorex firewalls. When the night of the attack finally came, the air was thick with tension. Nathan led the team through underground tunnels, creeping beneath the shattered city. The command center loomed above, a fortress of steel and alien technology humming with unseen power. Inside, Vorex soldiers moved with mechanical precision, unaware of the storm coming for them. Nathan's heart pounded in his chest, a savage rhythm that matched the dark resolve burning in his veins. Jax connected his device to a terminal, fingers flying over controls as digital locks began to fall. The Vorex alarms blared suddenly, cutting through the silence like a scream. They had been detected. Chaos erupted. Nathan's team fought with everything they had. Plasma bolts hissed past, sparks flying as metal and flesh collided. Lena tended to the wounded with grim efficiency, her hands steady even as the world burned around her. They pushed deeper into the command center, guided by Jax's hacking. Systems flickered and failed, giving them precious seconds to advance. The Vorex soldiers grew desperate, their confidence shattered by the unexpected ferocity of human attackers. Nathan reached the core control room, the heart of the alien operation. He planted explosives with shaking hands, the countdown ticking away like a heartbeat in the silence. As they retreated, the fortress began to collapse, metal twisting, lights dying, power draining away. Outside, the night sky exploded with fire. The command center was reduced to rubble, a symbol of defiance against the invaders. But victory tasted bitter. The Vorex retaliation was swift and brutal. They unleashed scorched earth tactics, razing villages and slaughtering civilians in retaliation for the strike. Nathan's group lost many, friends and allies torn apart by a hatred deeper than any human knew. Nathan stood among the ashes of a once thriving town, blood and dust covering his hands. He looked up at the dark sky, knowing this was far from over. Earth had responded, yes, but the war was only beginning. And Nathan understood now what it truly meant to fight, not just for survival, but for the soul of humanity itself. The aftermath of the command center's destruction was a nightmare etched in fire and ash. Nathan moved through the ruined outskirts of the city, the air thick with smoke and the acrid scent of death. Every step was heavy, burdened by loss. Villages had been wiped out, innocent people crushed under the Vorex's merciless reprisal. The aliens wanted to make an example, show the world what happened when humans dared to fight back. Nathan's thoughts churned with dark fury and bitter resolve. This was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a war for vengeance, for justice, for reclaiming what was stolen. But vengeance was a double-edged sword. Every act of resistance brought suffering, and every loss weighed on him like a stone in his chest. Marla caught up with him near the edge of the ruined town, her face pale but eyes burning with determination. "We did what we had to do," she said quietly. "But they're not done. The Vorex will escalate. They always do." Nathan nodded, not trusting his voice. He looked at the smoldering ruins, and then at the few survivors gathered in makeshift camps, their faces hollow, eyes empty from grief and exhaustion. "We need to change how we fight," Nathan said finally. "Hit harder, but smarter. Use their brutality against them. Make them bleed where they least expect it." Marla's lips pressed into a thin line. "Guerrilla warfare? Sabotage? We're outgunned and outnumbered." "Then we become what they fear," Nathan said. "Not soldiers, but shadows. Ghosts that haunt every corner of this planet. Will strike and vanish before they even know what hit them." The days that followed were a brutal test of endurance and will. Nathan's group split into smaller cells, scattering across the devastated lands like whispers of rebellion. They struck supply lines, destroyed communications, and spread chaos. Each success was a spark in the darkness, but the cost was high. Lena, the medic, barely slept. She treated wounds that never seemed to stop, broken bones, burns, infections. Every patient was a reminder of the war's price. Sometimes she would catch Nathan staring at the horizon, his face haunted by nightmares he never spoke of. One night, as they gathered around a flickering fire in an abandoned subway tunnel, Nathan broke the silence. "I keep seeing their faces," he admitted, voice rough. "The people we couldn't save. The ones we lost because I wasn't fast enough, strong enough." Marla reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "None of us are invincible, Nathan, but we keep fighting. For them." Jax, the mechanic, chimed in with a bitter laugh. "Maybe that's the real power we have. The kind of pain they can't understand. We're broken, but we're still here." Nathan looked at his ragged team, warriors shaped by loss and rage, and felt a grim pride. Earth's response was not just a rebellion. It was a reckoning. The Vorex grew desperate. Their patrols became more ruthless, their tactics more savage. They launched brutal sweeps, burning entire districts, rounding up suspected rebels without mercy. But the humans never stayed in one place long enough to be caught. Then came the day Nathan's group intercepted a transmission. Vorex plans to deploy a new weapon, a terrifying device capable of wiping out entire regions with a single strike. If the Vorex succeeded, millions would die in moments. The urgency was clear. Nathan called a meeting beneath the ruins of an old cathedral, its stained glass shattered but still holding on to faint light. "We stop that weapon," he said, voice steady despite the weight of the mission. "No more running, no more hiding. This is our chance to turn the tide." Marla nodded. "It's heavily guarded, deep in their main fortress. But if Jax can get close enough, maybe his hacking can buy us time." Lena handed Nathan a small vial. "This will help with the pain. You'll need it." Nathan clenched his fists. The dark road ahead was filled with danger and sacrifice, but there was no turning back. As they prepared for the most dangerous mission yet, Nathan felt the full weight of what it meant to fight for Earth, not just as a place on a map, but as the last bastion of humanity's stubborn, savage heart. The invasion was far from over, but Earth was awake now, and it was hungry. The night was heavy with silence as Nathan and his team slipped through the shattered streets toward the Vorex's main fortress. The city around them was a ghost, buildings twisted into grotesque shapes by alien weapons, and the only sound was the faint hum of distant patrols. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every corner a possible trap. But Nathan's mind was focused. There was no room for fear now. Only purpose. The fortress loomed ahead, an imposing structure of dark metal and shimmering energy shields. It was the heart of the Vorex occupation, a place where commands were given, where their devastating new weapon was kept. Getting inside was madness, but Nathan and his team had no other choice. Jax crouched beside a service entrance, pulling a small device from his pack. "This'll buy us some time," he muttered, fingers flying as he connected the hacking tool to the panel. Sparks flickered, and the glowing red lock turned green. The door hissed open, and they slipped inside. The corridors were cold and sterile, humming with alien technology. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something metallic, something not quite alive. Nathan felt the weight of the fortress pressing down on him, the claustrophobic maze of tunnels twisting like a beast's insides. They moved quietly, avoiding patrols and security drones, using Jax's device to disable cameras and alarms. Each step brought them closer to the control room, and closer to the weapon that could end them all. As they neared the core, the tension was palpable. Marla whispered, "This is it. Once we trigger the hack, we have maybe 10 minutes before they know what's happening." Nathan nodded, gripping his rifle tighter. "Everyone ready?" Lena checked their medkits and weapons with quick efficiency. "Ready as we'll ever be." Jax connected his device to the main terminal, the screens flickering to life. Lines of code streamed across the display as he worked to infiltrate the system. Suddenly, alarms blared. Someone had triggered a manual override. Vorex soldiers poured into the hallway, plasma rifles raised and deadly. The team sprang into action, gunfire echoing off the metal walls. Nathan felt the familiar burn in his side as a plasma bolt grazed him, but he pressed on, his mind a storm of focus and fury. "Jax, how much longer?" Nathan shouted over the chaos. "Almost there," Jax shouted back, fingers dancing over the keyboard. The firefight was brutal. Nathan covered Marla as she moved toward a side door, planting explosives. Lena dragged a wounded soldier to safety, her face pale but determined. Finally, the screen flashed green. "Hack complete. Weapon systems disabled," Jax announced. But the victory was short-lived. The ground shook violently. The fortress was collapsing, security measures triggering self-destruct protocols. "Move, now," Nathan barked. They raced through the twisting tunnels as the structure groaned and exploded behind them. Flames roared, debris fell, and the air filled with choking smoke. Nathan's legs burned with pain, but adrenaline pushed him forward. They burst into the night, gasping for air as the fortress imploded, sending a shockwave that lit the sky. The Vorex's devastating weapon was gone, destroyed by a ragtag group of humans who refused to give up. But as the dust settled, Nathan's thoughts turned dark. The cost had been high, too high. Many had died, and the Vorex would not forget. They would come back harder, more ruthless. Nathan looked around at his battered team, their faces marked by exhaustion and grief. He felt the weight of leadership heavier than ever. "We've won a battle," he said quietly, "but the war's far from over." Marla nodded grimly. "We've shown them Earth fights back. Now they know we're not just survivors. We're hunters." The fire in Nathan's chest burned brighter. This was no longer just about reclaiming land or destroying alien machines. It was about proving that humanity's spirit could not be crushed, that even in the darkest moments, Earth would respond with savage strength. He knew the road ahead would be filled with pain, loss, and impossible choices. But he was ready, because this was humanity's fight, raw, relentless, and unstoppable. The invasion had been going smooth until Earth responded, and now nothing would ever be the same. The nights grew colder, harsher, like the world itself was turning against them. Nathan sat alone on a broken concrete ledge overlooking the shattered cityscape, the weight of command pressing down like a suffocating fog. The fortress's destruction was a victory, yes, but one soaked in blood and sacrifice. Each loss etched itself deeper into his mind, gnawing at his resolve. There was no glory in this war, only a grim necessity. Around him, the survivors moved like ghosts, their faces pale in the flickering light of scattered fires. The invasion had ripped the world apart, and humanity was struggling not just to fight back, but to hold on to the pieces of itself. Every day was a battle, not just against the Vorex, but against despair. Marla approached quietly, her footsteps light but sure. She sat beside him, her gaze steady despite the exhaustion shadowing her eyes. "We've held the line for now," she said softly. "But the Vorex aren't just soldiers. They're strategists. They'll adapt." Nathan let out a bitter laugh. "They should have learned by now. Humans aren't easy to predict." She nodded. "True, but we need more than stubbornness. We need something that makes them fear us." Nathan's thoughts drifted to the darkest moments. The villages burned, friends lost, the nights spent crawling through rubble with nothing but rage to keep him going. Fear was a weapon, yes, but so was unpredictability. If they could strike where the Vorex least expected, maybe they could turn the tide. "We hit their communication networks," Nathan said. "Blow out their eyes and ears, make them blind before they can react." Marla smiled faintly. "I like that. Jax can help us with that." The next days were a blur of frantic activity. Jax worked tirelessly, hacking into alien systems with a mix of human ingenuity and stolen tech. Nathan and the others prepared strikes on communication towers, relay stations, anything that could cripple the Vorex's ability to coordinate. But the cost was steep. Each attack brought brutal reprisals, homes burned, innocent lives caught in the crossfire. The line between enemy and victim blurred, and Nathan felt the darkness creeping closer, threatening to consume them all. One evening, after a particularly savage raid, Nathan found himself face to face with a group of frightened civilians hiding in the ruins of a school. Children clung to their mothers, eyes wide with terror. Nathan's heart twisted. This was what the war had become. Not just a fight for survival, but a battle to keep humanity's soul intact. He knelt down, meeting their gaze. "We're fighting for you," he said quietly. "For all of us." A small boy looked up, eyes shining with a mix of fear and hope. "Will we win?" Nathan swallowed hard. "We have to." That night, as the city's distant fires burned, Nathan wrestled with the weight of leadership. Victory was no longer measured in battles won, but in the flickers of hope that refused to die. Then came the intelligence report that chilled him to the bone. The Vorex were developing something new, something darker than anything they'd seen. A weapon that didn't just destroy bodies but shattered minds, a psychic assault that could break willpower and turn allies into enemies. The stakes had risen. This was no longer a physical war alone. It was a battle for the very essence of humanity. Nathan gathered his team. "We stop that weapon before it's unleashed," he said, "or everything we've fought for will be lost." Marla's eyes burned with fierce determination. "We'll need a new plan, one that uses everything we have and everything they fear." Lena nodded. "We're running out of time." As the team prepared for this darkest mission yet, Nathan felt the weight of the coming storm. The invasion had pushed Earth to the brink. But now, with everything on the line, Earth would respond not just with fire, but with a darkness born of desperation and unbreakable will. The fight was far from over, and Nathan knew that the true battle, the one for humanity's soul, was just beginning. Nathan stood silently amid the ruins of what was once a bustling city center, the air heavy with smoke and the scent of burning debris. The Vorex psychic weapon wasn't just a rumor anymore. It was real, and worse than anything Nathan had imagined. The report spoke of entire resistance cells crumbling overnight, soldiers turning on each other in madness, and survivors lost to invisible forces tearing at their minds. This was a war that threatened to consume not just bodies, but souls. Marla crouched beside him, her face grim and pale under the flickering light of a dying fire. "If that weapon gets unleashed, she said quietly. "It won't matter how many guns we have. We'll all be gone before we can fight." Nathan clenched his fists, feeling the familiar surge of anger rise beneath the exhaustion. "We stop it, or we die trying." They gathered their team in a hidden bunker deep beneath the city ruins. Jax was already at work, tapping into the alien networks with his hacking rig, searching for the location of the psychic weapon's core. Lena prepared the medical supplies, her hands steady, but her eyes betraying worry. "This place," Jax muttered, eyes glued to the screen. "It's in a remote facility, heavily shielded, protected by more than just guards. They're using alien tech to block our sensors." Nathan leaned in. "Then we go in blind." The plan was risky, nearly suicidal, but there was no other option. They had to infiltrate the facility, disable the weapon, and get out before the Vorex realized what had happened. Failure meant not just death, but the collapse of all resistance. As they moved out, the city's ruins stretched around them like a tomb. The silence was oppressive, broken only by distant echoes of conflict and the occasional rumble of alien patrols. Each step was careful, deliberate. They reached the outskirts of the facility, a fortress carved into the jagged cliffs beyond the city. Security drones patrolled the skies, their mechanical eyes scanning for any sign of movement. Nathan's heart pounded as they slipped through shadows, using Jax's tech to avoid detection. Inside, the corridors were cold and sterile, humming with energy that felt unnatural, almost alive. The deeper they went, the heavier the psychic presence grew, a pressure on their minds that twisted thoughts and whispered doubts. Lena stumbled, clutching her head. "It's worse than I imagined," she whispered. "This place, it's like a poison in the air." Nathan gritted his teeth, fighting the creeping madness threatening to take hold. "Focus," he said, voice low. "We've come too far to let this break us." They reached the core chamber, a vast room filled with glowing machinery pulsating with eerie light. In the center, the psychic weapon thrummed with power, its energy radiating like a dark sun. Jax got to work, fingers flying over his device as he tried to override the controls. Alarms suddenly blared. Their presence was detected. Vorex soldiers poured in, plasma rifles blazing. Nathan and Marla fought back to back, their movements fierce and desperate. The psychic pressure clawed at their minds, turning fear into rage, doubt into fury. As Jax shouted that the override was almost complete, Nathan felt a sharp pain pierce his head. A psychic strike meant to break him. He gritted his teeth, pushing through the agony. "Almost there!" Jax yelled. With a final keystroke, the weapon powered down, the eerie glow fading. The soldiers faltered, their coordination broken. Nathan's team retreated, racing through collapsing tunnels as explosions ripped through the facility. They burst into the open air just as the fortress behind them crumbled into ruins. The victory was hollow. The psychic weapon was destroyed, but the cost was devastating. Lena was barely conscious, the psychic assault leaving scars that would not heal easily. Nathan looked at his team, battered but alive. The invasion was far from over. The Vorex would regroup, adapt, and return. But Earth had responded, with a darkness and strength that no alien force could ever understand. As dawn broke over the shattered horizon, Nathan made a silent vow. Humanity would not just survive this war. They would win it, no matter the cost. The dawn was a pale smear of gray over the broken cityscape, casting long shadows through the skeletal remains of buildings and twisted metal. Nathan sat by the flickering remnants of a campfire, staring into the embers as if they held the answers he desperately needed. The destruction of the psychic weapon had been a critical victory, but the toll it took on Lena and the rest of the team was undeniable. The scars left by that assault ran deeper than flesh and bone. Marla leaned against a crumbling wall nearby, her eyes never leaving Nathan. "We bought ourselves time," she said softly. "But the Vorex will come back stronger. They always do." Nathan's jaw tightened. "And we'll be ready. We have to be." But even as he said the words, a gnawing doubt crept in. The Vorex weren't just alien invaders. They were calculating, ruthless, willing to push humanity to the edge and beyond. Every victory felt like a step toward some darker abyss, a place where even hope might not survive. That night, as the city lay shrouded in uneasy silence, a scout returned with urgent news. The Vorex were mobilizing for a massive counteroffensive, a final push to crush the remaining resistance and claim the planet once and for all. Their forces were gathering at key strategic points, preparing to unleash a wave of destruction unlike anything Earth had seen. Nathan gathered his weary team in a makeshift bunker beneath the ruins. Faces were drawn and tired, but the fire in their eyes burned with fierce resolve. "This is it," Nathan said, voice low but steady. "They want to end this war before it even truly begins." Marla nodded grimly. "If they succeed, everything we've fought for dies." Lena, still pale but determined, added, "We have to strike first, hit their forces before they can gather full strength." Jax pulled up schematics and intelligence reports, tracing lines and points of attack with quick precision. "We hit their supply lines again, disrupt communications, and target their commanders. Chaos is our ally." Nathan felt the weight of responsibility settle over him like a storm cloud. The lives of thousands rested on the edge of his decisions. But he also felt something deeper, an unbreakable core of humanity's fierce will to survive. The days that followed were a blur of raids, ambushes, and desperate fights. Nathan's group struck with brutal efficiency, using every tactic they had learned in this merciless war. They became ghosts, shadows of vengeance haunting the Vorex forces, tearing apart supply chains and sowing discord. But the Vorex were relentless. Their retaliation was savage, indiscriminate. Entire settlements were razed, civilians caught in the merciless crossfire. Nathan's heart ached with every loss, every innocent life snuffed out like a candle in the wind. One night, after a particularly brutal skirmish, Nathan found himself alone, wandering through the ruins of a village. The silence was broken only by the distant cries of survivors and the crackling of fires. He knelt beside a shattered home, running his hand over the scorched earth where children had once played. A voice startled him. "You fight with fire," a weary man said, stepping from the shadows. "But fire can burn those who wield it, too." Nathan looked up, meeting the man's eyes filled with pain, loss, and something else. A warning. "I don't fight for fire," Nathan replied quietly. "I fight for those who can't." The man nodded slowly, disappearing back into the darkness. Nathan knew the road ahead was darker than ever. The war had stripped humanity bare, revealing not just courage but the capacity for cruelty, desperation, and sacrifice. But he also knew one thing with certainty. Earth had responded. And as long as even one spark of that response remained, the Vorex would never truly win. The invasion had been going smooth, until Earth roared back with a fury no one expected. And now, the real fight for the planet's soul was about to begin. Nathan's boots crunched over broken glass and rubble as he moved through the ruined streets, the weight of the war pressing down on him like a leaden shroud. The Vorex were tightening their noose, preparing for their final assault. Every shadow could hide an enemy, every whisper could carry a deadly secret. But Nathan's mind was sharper than ever, his will hardened by loss and determination. The survivors had become something else, warriors forged in the crucible of destruction. Nathan's group was no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for revenge, for justice, for the future of a planet that had been nearly lost. Marla joined him, her eyes scanning the horizon. The Vorex won't give us a moment's peace. Their final push is coming, and it's going to be brutal. Nathan nodded grimly. We've got one chance to hit them before they can fully mobilize. Strike at their command center again. This time we finish it. Jax, already working on the comms, looked up. I've been tracking their movements. They're vulnerable for a brief window when they regroup. If we move fast, we can catch them off guard. Lena approached, her face set in grim determination. We'll need to be ruthless. No mercy. Not this time. Nathan swallowed the knot of doubt tightening in his chest. The line between soldier and monster was thinner than ever, but there was no turning back. The night of the assault was moonless, the city swallowed in darkness. Nathan's team moved like shadows, slipping through alleys and tunnels, hearts pounding with adrenaline and fear. Every step was a reminder of what was at stake. As they reached the command center, alarms blared, and the battle erupted in a storm of fire and fury. Plasma bolts tore through the night, explosions shook the ground, and the air filled with shouts and screams. Nathan fought with a savage edge, each movement fueled by years of pain and rage. He saw comrades fall, felt the sting of burning flesh, but he pushed forward, driven by a relentless need to end the nightmare. Jax worked frantically to hack into the systems, disabling defenses and opening paths for their escape. Marla covered their flank, her shots precise and deadly. Lena tended to the wounded with calm efficiency, her presence a beacon in the chaos. The command center began to collapse, structural supports failing under the onslaught. Nathan felt the building shake beneath him, dust and debris choking the air. "Move out!" he shouted, rallying the survivors. They fled through crumbling corridors and shattered doorways, hearts pounding as the fortress imploded behind them in a fiery blaze. The Vorex's hold on the planet was breaking. But as Nathan caught his breath, the bitter truth settled over him like a shadow. The cost was unimaginable. Friends lost, homes destroyed, lives forever changed. The war had scarred Earth deeply. Yet in the ashes, a new hope flickered. Humanity had responded, not with submission, but with fury and unyielding strength. Nathan looked to the horizon, the first rays of dawn cutting through the smoke. The invasion had been going smooth, until Earth fought back with a ferocity no one could deny. And now, the real battle for the planet's future had begun. The air was thick with smoke and silence, broken only by the distant crackle of fires burning through what was left of the city. Nathan stood atop a shattered rooftop, staring at the horizon where the Vorex forces had begun their final, desperate assault. The alien invaders had been pushed back, their grand plans shattered, but they weren't finished. Not yet. The invasion was no longer a smooth, calculated campaign. It had become a brutal war of attrition, a clash of wills where every inch of Earth was soaked with blood and pain. Nathan could feel it deep inside. The dark truth that this fight was not just for territory or survival, but for the very soul of humanity. His team had grown smaller, their faces etched with scars and shadows of loss. Marla's sharp eyes scanned the distant lines of enemy troops, her lips pressed in a thin line. Lena moved beside Nathan, her hands steady, but her heart heavy with memories of those they couldn't save. "We've done what no one thought possible," Nathan said quietly. "We've made them afraid, but fear only makes monsters desperate." Marla nodded. "They'll throw everything they have at us now." Nathan's gaze hardened. "Then we show them what it means to fight on Earth." The plan was simple but deadly. Hit the Vorex command hub one last time. Not just to cripple their forces, but to send a message. Earth was not a prize to be taken lightly. It was a fortress, guarded by a fierce, unyielding spirit. They moved under cover of darkness, slipping through the ruins like ghosts. Every step was a dance with death. The Vorex had fortified their positions, but Nathan's group had learned to use the ruined city to their advantage. Ambushes, traps, guerrilla tactics that turned the invaders' strength into weakness. As they reached the command hub, the final battle erupted in a storm of fire and fury. Nathan fought with every ounce of strength, every shred of rage born from years of pain. Around him, his comrades fell. But their sacrifice was a blazing testament to humanity's refusal to be broken. Jax hacked into the core systems, planting explosives that would bring the enemy's fortress crumbling down. The countdown ticked away like a heartbeat in the chaos. With a final roar, the explosives detonated, sending shockwaves through the ground and tearing the Vorex stronghold apart. Flames swallowed the structure as it collapsed, burying the alien threat beneath tons of rubble. Nathan stumbled out into the burning night, bloodied and battered but alive. The war was not over, not by a long shot, but this victory was a turning point. The invasion had been going smooth until Earth responded with a vengeance no one could stop. The morning sun rose weakly over a scarred horizon, casting pale light on the ruins where Earth's fate had been decided. Nathan stood alone amid the rubble, the weight of the war settling heavily on his shoulders. The Vorex invasion, the nightmare that had swallowed whole cities, shattered lives, and threatened to erase humanity, had been broken. But at what cost? Around him, the silence was deafening. The battle cries had faded, replaced by the haunting stillness of a world left to pick up its shattered pieces. Survivors emerged cautiously from hiding, eyes wary but filled with a fragile hope. Earth had bled, but it had not died. Nathan's thoughts drifted to the faces of those lost, the friends who fought beside him, the innocent caught in the crossfire, the families torn apart. Their sacrifices had forged this hard-won peace. It was a peace born not of surrender, but of defiance. He turned toward the distant skyline, where the first signs of rebuilding were already taking shape. Humanity was bruised, scarred, but unbroken. The invasion had gone smooth for the Vorex only as long as humanity remained complacent, unaware. Once Earth had responded, the invaders faced a force they had never truly understood, the relentless, savage spirit of mankind. Marla joined him, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and determination. "We survived," she said softly. "But the war changed us. We can't go back." Nathan nodded. "No, we can't. But maybe that's what makes us stronger. We learned what it means to fight, not just with weapons, but with every part of ourselves." As the sun climbed higher, Nathan felt a strange mix of exhaustion and resolve. The road ahead was long and uncertain. Rebuilding a world torn apart by war would take time, and the scars would never fully heal. But Earth had responded, and that response was a promise that no matter what came next, humanity would endure. Fierce, unyielding, and forever changed, the invasion was over, not with submission, but with a roar.